here. And I know certainly Joe Roberts is pleased to have so many people here. I was just talking to him. So welcome to Lambton College. I'd like to open today's event by recognizing that Lambton College is located on the beautiful homeland that is the traditional territory of the Ojibwe, Potawatomi, and Odawa First Nations. These three individual nations make up the traditional Three Fires Confederacy. We acknowledge the grace and the welcome they have offered to all students, staff, and guests at Lambton College. You know, today is a special day as we welcome Joe Roberts and his team and the push for change drive that he is making. He is on a journey across our country to create a call for action. So incredible. To help homeless youth, and we are so pleased he has taken the time to stop at Lambton College to share that message with all of us. The purpose of his journey is to form a nation of people who are committed to taking action against poverty, abuse, prejudice, and the resulting youth homelessness. This call to action will, of course, resonate with our students, with all our faculty and our staff, because at Lambton College, we care about social justice. In fact, it is reinforced every day in programs like the criminal justice programs, health and community services, and many, many more. Joe and your team, your message will be heard. And now it is my pleasure to invite Jacob Pullen, Police Foundation student, to say a few words. Jacob?
So good afternoon, everyone. Before I begin, I'd like to thank Joe and the Push for Change team for coming to spend a few hours with us here at Lambton College. We're so happy to have them here. Also, for the record, it was Joe's 50th birthday not too long ago, so how about a nice round of applause for Joe? Doesn't look it at all, but you know, that's okay. Now, as our wonderful MC Judy Morris said, my name is Jacob Pullen. I'm a second-year Police Foundation student. I'm so grateful to have chosen to study at Lambton College, because had I gone somewhere else or had I done something else, I wouldn't be here sharing our story with you. Now, although Joe's journey began long before September, that's when Lambton College first got involved with the Push for Change. Constable Chris Black of the Lambton OPP had approached Lisa Myers, our Criminal Justice Program Coordinator, with the idea of donating our proceeds of our annual CJP versus OPP hockey game to a project called the Push for Change. Naturally, Lisa thought this was a great idea and proposed it to our class. Being the inquisitive person that I am, I looked into it immediately. And what I found was inspiring. Without even meeting Joe, his story alone had inspired me. And the fact that Joe decided to push a shopping cart across the country for 17 months was even more impressive. I was hooked instantly, and I knew that we had to do something. Especially being in the field of law enforcement, where officers work with people who suffer from mental health problems and homelessness every day. And even though it's not visible in Sarnia, it's not as visible in Sarnia as it is in Toronto, it does not mean that it doesn't exist in our own backyard, because it certainly does. So soon after finishing my research, I approached Lisa with the idea of hosting a CJP Push for Change Sleep Out Challenge. She thought it was a great idea, but suggested that we open it up to our entire School of Health and Community Services, and what a great idea that was. From there, we formed a committee of sorts to plan our Sleep Out Challenge, and quite a few students from the Child and Youth Care program played an integral role in the success of our Sleep Out Challenge, as did Erica Kelly, so thank you for that. Lisa and I have met often over the past few months to discuss our involvement with the Push for Change. The Sleep Out Challenge was our first event and very successful. Walking with Joe Saturday morning in the Santa Claus Parade in Petrolia was our second event. Today is our third event, and our fourth event will be on January 19th when we host our CJP versus OPP hockey game, where the proceeds will be donated to the Push for Change. We here at Lambton College and in the Police Foundation's programs are looking forward to the hockey game on the 19th, and we're also looking forward to continuing to support Joe's journey across the country and his goal to help end youth homelessness. Joe will continue to inspire us to be more involved in our communities as students, as leaders, and as we move forward in our careers in law enforcement. To conclude, I'd like to say once more thank you to everyone who has helped us along the way here at Lambton College. You've helped us help Joe and the Push for Change Rebound and the Hub, and the Lambton College Food Bank, who in turn are helping so many others.
That is amazing, Jacob. Well done. Great leadership there. Thank you for that. And Joe, it's not so bad being 50, honestly. Lambton College is turning 50 this year, right? And we've had a great history, and I know you've had a great history, and we're going to hear a little bit about it. But 50 is not bad. I sort of remember it vaguely. So thank you, Jacob. And I'd like to introduce Michelle Shelswell. She is a Lambton College Child and Youth Care Program extraordinary professor. And Ryan Mitchell, who is a social service worker student. They're going to talk about the Hub and the work the social service worker students did. And just to mention also that Michelle is also on the board for Rebound as well. So welcome, Michelle and Joe.
Thank you, everyone, for coming today, and thank you to Jacob and his committee who included the Hub in this, because I think it's really important that we also recognize what we're doing locally for youth homelessness. And so locally, 21 agencies in our community, this is unprecedented, came together and said we need to help our youth between the ages of 16 and 24 find their way. And part of that initiative is about homelessness. So we had a 3-phased project. The first was the research. So we found out, yes, we have gaps in our community. The second part is happening right now. Renovations are starting this week to the Hub. And so our community came together, like I said. We raised enough money to start these renovations. So phase 2 is the Hub. Phase 3 is the plan to have transitional supportive housing in our community for ages 16 to 24. Sure.
That'd be great.
Thanks. Apparently I'm not loud. So I just wanted to come and tell you a little bit about the Hub and tell you why we came together. Better? Okay. So we came together, an identified gap. Youth in our community were too young to access adult services or too old to access children's services. So community partners came together, realized this, and here we are today. 21 community agencies plus, and there's some of our partners in the room. Thank you for coming. The goal of the Hub is to help youth attain independent living skills, education and employment support, life and social skills, mental health and wellness education. It will also provide access to leisure activities in an inclusive, judgment-free, safe space, as well as address mental health issues and its associated stigma. So like Judy said, I've had the honor I've actually been the project manager for the Hub for the last couple of years, on top of my amazing job here at Lambton teaching in the Child and Youth Care Program. So with that being said, from day one, we wanted this to be a youth engagement strategy. And I think you've seen this, but here is our new logo for the Hub. We had a young person design that. There was a contest, and there was a young person who won, whose name is Simon Harris, and unfortunately, he wasn't able to come in and do this himself. We also have 3 youth advisors on our committee who are informing every process. So with all that happening in our community, the social service worker program said, hey, we have our community organization project. Come talk to us, tell us what you do, and they picked us. And so I'm going to let you hear from this amazing guy, Ryan, here, who's representing the second-year SSW class, to tell you about all the amazing things they did for the Hub.
Cool. Thank you, Michelle. As Michelle was just talking about, the Hub is this great monumental project that's happening here in Sarnia-Lambton. And so every year, the second year social service worker program here at Lambton College come together and identify a need or a service gap that's present in our community. And we try and bring in a lot of awareness. We pick an agency that would correspond with that and try to bring some funds and awareness to that project. And so this year, we pretty much unanimously decided and chose the Hub because it just falls in line with everything that we work towards as social service workers and supporting our community, and more importantly, the youth in our community, as this project will help and support countless youth in our community, moving into the future. So we did that, and we had some lots of exciting things happening. As you can see happening here behind me is a slideshow that was prepared by one of our committees in our class, and it shows some of the hard work that was put into it. And this was an amazing project, lots and lots of awesome learning experiences to go on. There was some setbacks that we were able to move forward, move through and move forward, and everybody seems to be real positive about it. And we're so grateful that everybody came out here to support this event today, and the Push for Change, and everybody else as well. So yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. Thanks, Ryan. Thanks so much, Michelle and Ryan. That's amazing, the hub. What a great endeavor for all of the social service worker students, and a great learning experience. Experiential learning, that's what we do at the college. It is now my pleasure to introduce Megan Namabin, a Lambton College graduate and a member of the Aamjiwnaang First Nation, to share her story with you. Megan.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for having me. Don't mind me, I'm extremely nervous, so. But yes, I am a CYW graduate of 2014 in the Child and Youth Worker program. I also sing every year at our graduation, O Canada in half English and half Ojibwe as well. So I'm gonna kind of take a second and go back, because my story is probably like a lot of those that are gonna be served in the hub. Little hard, but so I'm going to go back to when I was 18. This is a time when I was almost graduating here at Lambton College. I had my own personal struggles. My mother was had an addiction to her fentanyl patches, so that was very tough. I had to go through school knowing these things. I couldn't help. I tried. And then I finally had to say, I had to step back and go, if this is what you choose, then I need to do something else with my life. I left home. I had nowhere to go. The gentleman I was with at the time wasn't exactly the best housing situation either. There was no hot water. There was no heat. So we were all kind of in the same boat. I didn't have anything like the hub, where it's going to help so many people. It could have helped me by just having someone to talk to about what was going on in my home life. My mother always had a saying, nothing is said outside these doors. And I'm sure that happens in a lot of families as well. So I stuck with that for a while until I finally said, this is enough. I can't do it anymore. I finally spoke out with my teachers. I let them know what was going on. They were so supportive. That was probably my biggest support, was here at the college. I had people I could talk to. I had people I could go to if there was issues. The counselors here as well were fantastic. As time went on, her condition became worsened. Health issues on top of her addiction. And in the year of 2014 of January, she passed away. She overdosed accidentally on her fentanyl patches. I didn't know what I was going to do. I was to be graduating here in April, June. I didn't know if I wanted to continue. My mom was a single mom my whole life. Just her, me and her. And I'm sure a lot of families are like that here as well. So having the hub is a fantastic, wonderful idea that's now in action. It's going to happen. I'm so happy that I'm able to stand in front of you today and kind of give you a little background on my life. And if it wasn't for Lambton College, I probably wouldn't have graduated. So I want to thank you all. I want to say push for change is the way to go. We need to stop youth homelessness. We need to stop poverty, abuse, because we all have our stories. We've all experienced it in different degrees. Some might be worse than others. Some might be unbelievably hard. But I want to just say thank you guys so much. I'm glad I could share a little bit of my story. And I hope that I hope to see things go in a new direction here in Sarnia-Lambton thanks to this. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Megan. Took incredible courage. It's so impactful in terms of the necessity for change, necessity for the hub and places like the hub. And I'd like to introduce you next to speak about that, and I'm introducing Joe Roberts. So I'll give you a little bit about his background and share with you who he is, other than being 50. He is a celebrated Canadian entrepreneur. He was a celebrated Canadian entrepreneur before he was 35 years old. Joe is the winner of the Ontario Premier's Award, the Courage to Come Back Award, and recently received an honorary doctorate from Laurentian University. 25 years ago, however, Joe was a homeless youth pushing a shopping cart around Vancouver's downtown east side. Joe is now in the middle of a campaign to push a shopping cart 9,000 kilometers across Canada to raise awareness and funds to help prevent homelessness. Today is day 219. Think about your days and think about his. Of his 517-day trek, he's already walked 4,119 of the 9,000 kilometers. I hope he has a Fitbit, because tracking all his steps. Joe is a testament to the idea, really, that anything is possible. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Executive Director of the Push for Change Foundation, Joe Roberts.
Now, 50 isn't old, unless you're comparing yourself to the age of an institution. Yes, because I've never had my age compared to how old a college or so. Anyway, the story is probably the most important thing for creating social change, and I just want to acknowledge Megan, the courage to share your story. It's always tough. The first time I ever shared my story, I was a successful CEO of a company. Nobody knew. And I got up in a luncheon. It was a business women's luncheon, and I just put my head down and I read. And I was terrified because I thought they'll judge me. You know, I was a junkie. I was a heroin addict. Yeah, I made a lot of mistakes. And when I popped my head back up, I looked at how that room was moved, because the struggle we all identify with in one shape or another. Maybe our stories aren't the same, but we all have a connection to it. And so I just want to thank and acknowledge you for having the courage to come up. And I want to encourage you to continue to tell your story. You have the ability to reach and connect with people that are just meant for you to reach and connect with. And so it's the stories that will continue to push forward a better understanding, to collapse stigma and discrimination, for us to understand what it is and what it is not, to understand that sometimes life lifes us and that we don't get the choices that other people get, and that we still have to move forward. When we take a look at some of the systemic problems around Canada and the United States, they are systems related, not individual related, because nobody puts their hand up to say, I want these things in my life. I want to thank Lambton College for hosting the Push for Change today. We're humbled to be here, and we're grateful to be here to carry our message. I want to thank Judy Morris for having us here and for making all of this possible. I want to thank Lisa Myers for helping and coordinating. We had a great time in the Santa Claus parade, and I was a little tired. I was a little disengaged. I had kind of walked a full day before I walked in the Santa Claus parade, so it was kind of like, but I digress. I want to thank Jack from Rebound. Absolutely humbled. The Hub, as you'll hear in the story and the work that the Push for Change is trying to do, it's about prevention, it's about reaching, it's about connecting, it's about having those resources available to a young person in time of crisis and before crisis hits. So I absolutely applaud that. And one of the things that's really cool about the Push for Change is that we get to go into all kinds of communities and we get to come together and we get to bring awareness to the issue and shine light on these programs and projects that we need to continue to foster and develop. Because if we don't, the alternative is to see individuals continue to fall through those cracks. I want to thank our community safety partners with the Ontario Provincial Police. I want to thank Chris and Jill Harding for your support and helping us engage in this community. And then lastly, I want to thank and acknowledge Jacob and just ask if you'd come up here for a second. We started doing something in the Push for Change a long time ago, and we acknowledged change makers and community champions with something called a challenge coin. You can Google and get a better understanding of what these mean, but they're very, very rich with inside paramilitary culture, especially in policing. We created them because they represent unity, they represent collaboration. But they go back to the Second World War, and they're given to individuals an acknowledgement as being part of the team. And so on behalf of myself, Marie, Jamie, and our board of directors, we want to thank you and acknowledge you for the work that you've done to coordinate this, for the sleep out, for the hockey game, and continuing to carry the torch for the Push for Change, but not just for us, for the individuals that it represents. Did I get it all, Marie? Yeah, I'm all. If I didn't mention you and you are a part of this, please forgive me. It's probably one of, I get asked by the media all the time, what's the hardest thing? You know, the hardest thing in running a national campaign like this, where we're doing, one or two of these a day in different communities, is acknowledging all the people that come together to support it. We're a very small grassroots team, and so we're very, very dependent upon our community champions and folks to come together and organize. The Push for Change. The story is the most important. You ask the question, why would a guy walk across Canada supporting a conversation about what we need to do to prevent, reduce, and end youth homelessness? You need to understand the backdrop, the story behind the motivation to do that. I came from a very typical, normal, middle-class Canadian family. In fact, I grew up in a town with 10,000 people, about an hour and a half north of Toronto. Does anybody know where Midland, Ontario is? Anybody here from Midland? It's okay. Well, you're kind of from the... Oh, there you go. Okay, I was going to say maybe just need some more help in acknowledging that, it's okay. We're in a safe room. It's good. I grew up in Midland, and life was great. I remember my fondest memory, I was in grade 3, and there was a clock on the wall, just like this one in the back, and I used to watch the clock. Now, it's not that I didn't like school, it's just I liked home more. I like going home. I came from an Irish Scottish background. Which means I always want to drink, but I never want to pay for it. I don't know who I offend more in that, but anyways, my home on the weekend would fill up with relatives. The pipes and drums were a part of our family, and my grandpa, and so we used to have all the Mackenzies and the McGregors and everybody. They would all come to our house, and it was fun. And I had a dad who was this extraordinary guy. He was this larger-than-life guy and really supportive, absolutely brilliant. He was a working man. And he used to, like me, run home after work to be with his family. That's what he wanted to do. We did family vacations. And in my dad's shadow, I could do or be anything. He was the kind of guy who would say things to me like, I love you. you can do anything, you can be anything. And we had this incredible tight family unit. And so at 3:20, I remember looking at the clock and sitting in that classroom and thinking, I cannot wait to go home. I'm going to get on my bike. I'm going to ride around. I'm going to play my tree fort. I'm going to hang out with my family, and things are going to be great. So growing up, it was very normal, very typical. Mom stayed at home. She was a homemaker. That's what she wanted to do. It wasn't that she couldn't get her education and have a career. She just wanted to be at home. It was 1975, and that was kind of, that was probably a lot more of a sort of a traditional time. And so things were great, and my life was going incredibly well. But sometimes life lifes us, and things happen that we don't expect. You're walking down the road of life and minding your own business, and all of a sudden, big change. And we got a knock on the door, and we were told that Dad was no longer with us. And Dad was young. He was 35. I was 8. My brother was 11. My little sister was 5. And so just like that, Mom was a single mom. But more than that, Mom didn't have insurance on Dad. And so we went from middle class to poverty in one day. We went from a dad to not dad. We went from safe, fun, secure, to fear and anxiety. And I remember the moment where we were having dinner at the local A&W about 10 days after the funeral. And in our home, what happened was the house filled with people, and there was more potato salad. I remember as an 8-year-old thinking, we're never going to eat all this potato salad. Like, there's just way too much potato salad. And then slowly, family went away and people went back to their lives. And we were left going, what's next? And we were having dinner at the local A&W, and my mom uncharacteristically snapped at my brother and I because we were bickering with each other. And she said, I'm buying you dinner with the money that was in your father's wallet, and I don't know what I'm going to do next. And she began to sob. And that's when us kids kind of went, this isn't good. And it was one of those defining moments. And so I think partly because my mom was afraid to be alone, and partly because of economics, she remarried really quickly. The only problem is the next guy who came in, he wasn't like my dad. In fact, he couldn't have been more opposite. He was a violent, abusive alcoholic. And so I went from a father who would say things like, I love you, you can be anything, to a man who would say things like, you're stupid, you're dumb, and you'll never amount to anything. Now, this is important for me to say, I don't share this story today from a place of being a victim. I forgave him a long time ago. I understand that hurt people hurt people. I rest in knowing that cycle of abuse and violence and addiction has arrested itself in our family, and that won't get passed on to my daughter. Yeah. But at the time, I didn't know how to deal with that. And I understand today as a youth advocate, if you can get a child to believe a lie about who they are and how they fit into the world, you can control the way they live. And at a young age, I had a compromised sense of self-worth. And so I was out there in the world looking for a place to plug in and fit. 2 years after that first school experience where I looked at the clock, I was back in class. It was grade 5 or 6, I can't remember. And I remember looking at the clock, and my entire world was different. Because I looked at that clock and it said 3:20, and all I could think is, I don't want to go home. Home sucks. And I didn't have a whole lot of choice because I was 9. I was 10. And so when the opportunity presented itself, my brother and his friends were experimenting with drugs, and I joined them. Not because I was curious about drugs. It's because I wanted to belong. I wanted to connect. I wasn't getting that connection at home. And if a young person doesn't get that connection at home, they're gonna look out there for it. And sometimes what they connect in with isn't really healthy. And I remember, I got high for the first time, and I went home, and all the stuff that was my normal life was all of a sudden bearable. In this bubble of substance, I could somehow deal with what was going on around me, the yelling and the screaming, and I wasn't afraid. So for the first time since my dad died, I felt safe. That created a pattern in my life for the next 15 years that almost killed me. When you look around, everyone around you, everyone's dealing with something. We're all dealing with stuff. And a lot of times we don't show it. And we had that rule in our family too. Nobody talks about it. Mom just used to wear these big sunglasses to hide her black eyes. We didn't talk about that. And so my life continued to slide downhill. By the time I was 15 years old, I was really angry and rebellious. If you would have run into me, you would have thought, wow, this kid's a handful, right? You want to ask the question, what happened before that happened? Oftentimes we look at behavior, and we see behavior and we see its consequences, but we don't ask what happened. The deeper and more empathic question. I was in high school, and I was like Bart Simpson. Hankster the prankster, the wannabe gangster. I was just, I was smart, but I wasn't engaged. And I didn't have that champion in high school. And so at 15 years old, I began to have a lot of challenges. And I started to have a lot of family conflict, started to fight a lot with my stepfather. And at 15, I left. At 15 years old, I couldn't be at home anymore. I understand today that I represent one of 67% of young people who experience youth homelessness in this province due to family conflict. It wasn't that I was bad, it was bad. And I had to go. But I didn't have anything to go to, and oftentimes in those conflicts, it's not like you think them through, you just leave. I was talking to a girl in St. Thomas a month ago when I walked through St. Thomas, and I said, "You're 17. She said, "Yeah." I said, "You ever have one of those fights with your mom? Like where you just really go at it?" And she goes, "Oh yeah." I said, "Well, imagine you slam the door, she slams the door, and the door doesn't open again." And that's youth homelessness. Couch surfing, living in precarious environments, compromising your safety for a bed or a couch. Most of the homelessness that we see in Canada and in communities like Sarnia, in the rural communities, it's all invisible. But that's also the place where there's the greatest opportunity. So we don't wait till someone's sitting on a piece of cardboard in front of the liquor store in London or Windsor or Toronto before we throw out a life preserver. We try and cut that off before it becomes a major issue. At 15, I left home. At 16, I quit school. At 17, I jumped on a Greyhound bus. At 18, 19, I was living in downtown East Vancouver, pushing a shopping cart, living in the downtown east side. I was addicted to heroin. I lived under the Georgia Street Viaduct, and that's a picture of me. And if you would have walked past me back then, I would have challenged your belief on the probability of my success. And rightly so, because past behavior is a pretty good, clear indication of future behavior. But the thing that I look at today isn't probability, I look at possibility. Possibility is the thing that we invest in. Possibility is where all human innovation is. Possibility is looking at the world and seeing what it isn't, but what it could be. Possibility is what we admire in great leaders and their vision of seeing something that isn't, but spending their time moving towards a probable or a possible outcome if they'd only throw their time and energy. That's what the Push for Change is about. It's about creating the possibility that one day we as a nation really kind of take a look at more preventative models so that the face of homelessness, youth and adult, looks differently than it does today. And we can get there. I'm a firm believer in that, and I know I'm not alone. I continued to struggle until Mom brought me back from Vancouver. I had Mom who was a real strong supporter. She ended up coming back flew out one day. I called and asked for help. I walked into a Salvation Army. They asked me What can we do to help you? And I said, I think I want to call my mom. Mom and I are still really close. Mom's still alive. And she said, are you willing to change? And I said, yes. And so she came out to Vancouver. She scooped me up and she brought me back home. We had still not dealt with the root causes, with the addiction, with the underlying early childhood trauma stuff, the stuff from stepdad and some other things. And so I continued to struggle with addiction. For me, addiction was the way that I emotionally coped with a very fear-based and uncertain world. Even though it produced all kinds of incredibly negative results in my life, it still served a purpose to protect me emotionally. Now, one night, heavily sedated and under the influence, I had another crisis. And you know, when I was growing up, I didn't have a very good relationship with law enforcement. I didn't. I had an attitude and an anger towards anything that was authoritative. Is that a word? Is it? Authoritative. Well, I made up a word. That's pretty good. I made up a word at Lambton College. And I'm only 50. That's pretty good. That's pretty good.
This is a cardinal sin.
Because the people who were entrusted with me the responsibility to be those authority figures in my life let me down. So I didn't like probation officers and teachers. You know, I didn't like my stepfather and anybody who told me what to do. And so I had this clash. But on a dark, rainy night in 1991, the most unlikely hero came to my house. My mom walked into the bedroom and I had a 9mm pistol. And I was suicidal. And Mom said, "What are you doing?" And I said, I don't think I really want to go on. And she got really upset and scared, and she ran out and she called the Ontario Provincial Police. And the arresting officer on scene was Constable Scott McLeod. Today, police and foundation programs are teaching mental health. We're teaching the difference between sick versus bad, crisis versus threat. We're seeing a shift, and I'm encouraged by that shift. 25 years ago, I believe that Scotty was way ahead of the mental health bell curve, because what he saw and what he encountered when he entered my mom's house is a boy in crisis versus a man who was a threat. And he worked to diffuse the situation and use his training to put separation between me and that weapon. And I still got charged. But I ended up going to a hospital that night and to a mental health clinic, and they began to work with me. They created an opening and a space for me. I ended up going to detox in Kingston, Ontario. I then went into a full residential treatment program to deal with some of the root causes, which were addiction. After 6 months in the treatment center, I ended up going back to college. I remember I got tricked by my vocational rehabilitation counselor to go in school, because I was a high school dropout. I failed out of 3 of the 4 high schools in Barrie. And not one of the schools ever called and said, "Hey, what's up?" And so I walked around with a story thinking I was stupid, because I'd been fed that story. So I remember I walked on to the campus at Loyalist, and I don't know what your first day was like, but my first day was, I didn't think I could do it. I was really scared. I was leaving a lot of, there was so much unknown. And it's normal to feel that level of anxiety. Sometimes we cling to the things that aren't working because we're afraid to let go and move in to that unknown. And I had 2 distinct thoughts when I walked onto the campus at Loyalist. First thought I had was, 6 months ago they probably wouldn't have let me use the bathroom here because I was sketchy. And then the next thought I had when I walked onto the campus was, man, is there ever a lot of cans around here? Because I used to collect cans. You don't recycle in Ontario, otherwise you'd get that joke. That's funnier in my head. But something wonderful happened for me at college. I started to do well. I had these really great professors. I let 2 of them know my story. And in January, I was having a really rough go. And I went into Tommy Thorne's office and I said, I want to quit. and I need you to sign this paperwork so I can get out of here. And he said, I'm not going to do that. I said, why? He said, because I believe in you. He said, if you need extra time or tutoring or whatever, I'll sit down and I'll help you. But I believe that you've got a bright future, and I'm not going to let you quit this. He said, there's not a lot of alternatives if you drop out. And so I put my head down and I continue to work. The thing that Tom taught me is that it doesn't matter how you feel. It only matters what you do. That sometimes you're going to feel scared and uncertain. Do it anyway. Because your greatest success is on the other side of those emotions. And at the end of fear, according to Jim Carrey, is nothing. That great speech that he gave, at the end of fear, there's nothing. And that's what I found in my life. You know? And so fail, going 100%. Give it everything you got, and that's what I did. 4 years later, I walked across the stage at Loyalist College, and they called out my name, Joe Roberts. I graduated 2 college diplomas with a 3.94 GPA. Yeah, I still didn't get a haircut though, eh? I was believed about 6 or 7 years later, I went back to that very college where I received the Ontario Premier's Award for what I did afterwards. Inside me the entire time was something extraordinary. Inside each and every one of us is something extraordinary. But sometimes our story and our experience blocks that brilliance, that potential. And I needed so many people. You read that bio and it sounds like I did this wonderful thing, but the reality is I'm a community investment gone correct. I had over 10,000 people. I had Scott in my corner. I had Mom in my corner. I had frontline agencies in my corner. I had counselors and teachers and friends from the community. I had social workers. I had sponsors and other people in the recovery community. I had so many people propping me up when I was ready to crumble. You know, weak is incredibly strong. And sometimes the hardest thing that we do is put our hand up and ask for help when we're going through a tough time. There's always a context when I'm in a room and I'm talking to people. It's like we're talking about people out there. We're not. We're talking about people right here. Each and every one of us goes through that tough time. It's important for us to reach out and use those support systems that we have around us. There's no greater gift than helping someone, and there's somebody who's waiting to help you if and when you need that help. And then the reciprocal is then you get to be there for them or someone else when they need help. And that's kind of how the whole thing works. I was driving into my office in 2003, driving a great big sports sedan, and I stopped at the corner and I looked out the window and there's a kid pushing a shopping cart. When I got to the office that day, sitting on my desk was a copy of Canadian Business and Maclean's magazine. I was on the cover of one and acknowledged in the other as one of 10 Canadians who make a difference. In less than 12 years, I went from pushing a shopping buggy around the downtown east side to being on the cover of Canadian Business magazines as a celebrated entrepreneur. I believe inside each and every one of us is a possibility. I don't think there's anything that's impossible. I think there's some things that are improbable, but I don't invest in improbability. I invest in possibility. I got to a place in my life where I wanted to fulfill on a promise I had made on a street corner in 1991. If I ever got off the streets, I would do something to pay it forward. I stepped back and began working with some of the national voices and thinkers on the issue of homelessness and youth homelessness. I began working with guys like Dr. Stephen Gates from the Canadian Observatory on Homelessness. I began talking to folks like Tim Richter and Melanie Redmond from Away Home. I began to interview and learn and understand from frontline practitioners what the issues are and what the issues aren't, and how misinformed the public is on what the issues that actually create homelessness are. And then I looked at, from a pragmatic business perspective, how we actually invest in homelessness in this country. And it's not a bad thing, it's just an observation. We spend a ton of time looking at emergency response, which is good. We need to support people when they're in that emergency need. We absolutely have to be there. But if we really want to love on the emergency services sector, we need to take a look at investing on either side. We need to take a look at investing on prevention models. If something is predictable, it's preventable. You'd never go into a factory setting not wearing industrial goggles or boots or a hard hat or a harness if you were up high, because we know that those safety precautions will have a better chance of getting you home at night to your family. Yet we have a public education system that isn't as supportive for young people when they begin to have those risks. And the ability to access those resources is sometimes difficult. If a child needs access to mental health, or they need access to a different place to live, or they need access to addictions, or they need access to early childhood trauma. And so in talking with these really smart people, they explained to me that if we're ever going to see a sunset on the issue of homelessness and youth homelessness, we need to take a look at investing in prevention and housing first initiatives that are tailored. And so I said, if I was to be involved in some sort of awareness and fundraising campaign, what would you invest in? They said unanimously, they said we need to invest in prevention. We are about 12 years behind as a nation in these investments and gathering the data and the research to learn what the sustainable long-term models are and roll them across the country. And so working with Away Home, Raising the Roof, and the Canadian Observatory, we began formulating a project called the Upstream. And how it basically works is we support young people before they become homeless, when they're still sitting in the classroom. Every single young person who's ever cycled out, who ends up experiencing homelessness, was once sitting in a classroom. So the best place to work with them is when they're still in school. So armed with that, I said, okay, now we know what we want to invest in. How do you raise money? How do you raise awareness? And I was on an airplane ride with my friend who's part Canadian, part Australian. And I said, well, what could we do to go across the country and really kind of shine some light on this? And my friend Sean said, well, mate, he said, when Canadians want to raise money for things, they trottle across the country. It's kind of Canada's thing. He said, why don't you run across Canada for youth homelessness? I said, why don't you run across Canada? The idea of running across Canada didn't appeal to me, but then he said, you need to do something that's going to be different. He said, why don't you push a shopping cart? It's your story. It's a symbol of chronic homelessness. And I said, that's a really good idea. And so we began working. We put a campaign together that would last 517 days, which is 17 months. It would take 9,000 kilometers, walk across 10 provinces, visit 3 northern territories with over 400 community events. Today is day 219. And I've walked 4,119 kilometers. And I'm here in Sarnia. Along the way, we've had a tremendous amount of community engagement. Community engagement's absolutely key. If all you're doing is walking on the side of the highway and not doing this, it's not going to move the needle a great deal. Probably more importantly, what's happened here is not this event today and sharing this piece of it, but it's the work that you're doing on the sleep outs. It's the work that you're doing tracking the social media. It's the work that you're doing on the hockey tournaments. Those kinds of events really sort of, they're the grassroots things that really raise awareness and get people's head wrapped around what this issue is. So we've had excellent community engagement. The core of a lot of what we're trying to do is engage schools at all levels. At college and university level, but also at elementary and high schools. And we've had a tremendous amount of success with that. When we came into the Halton School District, we were quite inspired by what happened. The Halton School District got 10 schools together and we ended up doing a walk. But what I find really ironic is I walked for 22 kilometers and then met the students, and then they had to walk for 2 kilometers with me. And the 22 that I walked was bone dry, and the 2 that they walked with me, it just absolutely poured. But even though the rain was tough, the kids were really, really excited. This little video captures what we did in Halton. That we're good?
Social justice raises the volume. We won't have that conversation. Then Greg Gilbert, Stoll, So I'm just excited to be here. The students are awesome. The weather's terrible, but the spirit is really high. I'm humbled to be in Hamilton and to be received by all these wonderful young people. This extraordinary young lady is pushed to last. Kilday or so with
So that was one. We've had, I think, 30 or 40 different kinds of school events. It's fantastic being able to get in and plant seeds in their young minds to talk about their possibility, but also to take a look around them and to see what is homelessness. Homelessness is disengagement. Homelessness is family conflict. Homelessness is mental health. These are the root causes that actually creates. And so listening to you today to talk about what the Hub is doing, this is absolutely awesome because it's that place where young people can come in and be safe and have that connection and have those people to talk to and work through the stuff. We continued to move forward. You think running a national campaign that takes 17 months, I'd have a team of 30 people, but this is actually our team, and they're all here today. There's Marie in the back. Jamie's our chief support person. He drives and helps us. Where's Jamie? Where's Jamie? Oh, there's Jamie sitting down. What are you doing sitting down? This is a work day. Jamie is absolutely brilliant. He supports, he doesn't just do the driving, he does all kinds of 1,000 other things. And Marie's the campaign director, and she works harder than I do. She was the one that liaisoned with Lambton and put all this together. She's the nerve center of the entire campaign. She's also the love of my life. And so, yeah. Marie and I dated in grade 10. We actually went to high school together. And we split up, and we reconnected 28 years later. And last April on Easter Saturday, we got married. So in a lot of ways, the Push for Change is kind of our honeymoon. Yeah, I'm glad you find that funny because she doesn't find that funny at all. So we traveled a lot of road. We went through all of Atlantic Canada. So I walked across Newfoundland, 917K, walked across Cape Breton Island, then Nova Scotia into Halifax, then up across Prince Edward Island, all across New Brunswick, all across Quebec, and then we walked into Ontario, and it's been a game changer since we got here. Our community safety partnership has been with the OPP. The OPP are beside us every step of the way. Where we're not in their jurisdiction, they've built bridges for us to engage with the local municipal police forces. So we've had municipal police beside us through every community that we're with, and the OPP were there to meet me. And when I walked over the bridge into Hawkesbury, I was met by Commissioner Vince Hawkes, and none other than the greatest hockey dad in the world, Walter Gretzky. One of the reasons why the Ontario Provincial Police is behind this is not just because of the story of Scott and Joe, but because community safety and youth safety is at the heart of what is important to the Ontario Provincial Police. And the high level of engagement. We've got over 100 events planned with OPP throughout the province of Ontario. As I walked with Walter Gretzky, I wanted to learn from a guy who's really smart and raised some pretty good kids, not just Wayne. And I asked him a question. I said, what one piece of advice would you give to help create resiliency in young people? And he said, don't quit. And I thought, if every young person who had challenges had Walter Gretzky as a dad, we'd have some pretty resilient kids in this country. But the reality is we don't always get a Walter Gretzky for a dad. And so that continues to do the work that you're going to do in your careers once you leave this great college. Whether you're in police foundations, SSW, or you continue to be a teacher, or whatever background you have, we all play a role. We walked into Ontario with style. When we got to Ottawa, we were jumping for joy. One of the things that we always wanted to do is to have a conversation with our federal government where policy is made, to not just inspire and engage community, but to inspire and engage our federal policymakers. And the reason we're jumping for joy is because this happened a couple of weeks later.
Mr. Speaker, today I pay tribute to Joe Roberts, a man who grew up in Midland in my riding, but who in 1989 was a teenage addict living on the streets of Vancouver. With the help of family and a caring police officer, he was able to turn his life around.
He went on to lead his own enterprise and became financially independent. And he's shared his story with audiences across the country. 5 years ago, he and his colleagues created Push for Change, a project to raise the issue of youth homelessness to greater attention from policymakers and the public. 35,000 young Canadians face this reality every year. Last May 1st in St. John's, Newfoundland, he started pushing a shopping cart on a 9,000-kilometer trek across Canada, and he's speaking out in every community he visits. Today is day 178, and Joe is here visiting parliamentarians with his wife and campaign director, Marie. I invite all honourable members to join in saluting Joe Roberts' campaign and his push for change.
A couple days later, I walked down University Avenue with MPP Chris Ballard onto the lawn of Queen's Park, where we met Kathleen Wynne. We are now having a conversation with our provincial government and with our federal government, and we've had sit-downs with Minister Adam Vaughan, had conversations with Minister Jean-Yves Duclos, and these are the people closest to the Prime Minister who actually make policy. We got an email a couple weeks ago, and we've got to wait for the calendars to line up, but it was from the Prime Minister's office, and Prime Minister Trudeau would love to meet. Yeah, that's cool, eh? It might be a photo op, but it might be something bigger, and that's what we hold the possibility of. If that wasn't cool enough, when we got into the Toronto area, my friends Mark and Craig Kielberger from We Day invited me to speak at the Air Canada Centre. So if you think you're nervous here, woo-wee, 18,000, I was on that little spot right out there with the shopping cart, but we got to engage with the We Day family event. We continued around the Toronto area, made it down to Niagara Falls, and then we made it down to Windsor. And then yesterday, we made it into your fair city and walked around Sarnia. We were in the Lambton Santa Claus Parade, and we will now begin to move that way towards London. And we're heading into a very dark, cold Canadian winter. I've been through 10 pairs of shoes, and yes, I will walk through the winter. Because it's kind of the point, isn't it? It's hard, and you don't get to choose your weather if you're out there. It's hard to change policy, and we're going to continue to grind as we walk across this great nation of ours. We have another 10 months and a few days to go before we reach Vancouver on September 30th. And I have about 5,000 more kilometers to walk. Last year I was in an interview, and the reporter asked me, what does the push for change mean to you? And the day before, I had been out for a walk, and I found a penny on the side of the road, as I often do. When I find these pennies out in the street, they're banged up, they're weathered, they have some patina on them. They don't look like all the other pennies. But as I held that penny in my hand, I realized something about this penny is that it will never ever lose its value. Despite the road it's traveled, and despite its outwards appearance, it will always be a penny, and it will always hold its value. It can't lose it. That's the change that we push for. It's for young people who don't have a voice, who didn't get to choose their parents, their community, who didn't get to choose their sexuality, who didn't get to choose the trauma, who didn't get to choose poverty, but deserve a fighting chance to find their possibility and transition safely into adulthood. That's who the Push for Change is for, and that's who you have taken a stand for. Not me and our team, but for the young people who are unseen and unheard. That's who we push for change, and we will continue to do so long after we arrive into Vancouver. Thank you. Thank you. We brought some. Are you gonna? No, you can come up. You can come up. We brought pins. You don't have to make a donation. Our fundraising goal is 50 cents from every Canadian. We'd love to take your donation. We can take credit cards. We can also do tax receipt because we are a charitable organization. But more than that, I think that some of the things that you can do is track us and follow us on social media. We've got all the channels open. We've got Snapchat, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and probably a couple I don't even know about. So come and follow the conversation online. And just last call to action. The simplest thing that you can do is go to our website, thepushforchange.com, and click on write a letter to my MP. And that'll actually take you to the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness, where you can fill out information and write a letter to your member of parliament. If we write enough letters to the members of parliament, the federal government can't ignore this issue. Thanks.
So wow, that was amazing, honestly. You know, I can see what this takes from you, the toll that it takes from you. It likely takes a toll when you're walking, but telling the story is really where it's at. I heard in your presentation a lot about people and people having faith in other people, people allowing others to fail and then to succeed. It's critical. It's all about who we are in terms of a college here. It's also about education. And education, even though it was a Loyalist college, education is a catalyst for change. It's huge. It's absolutely huge. And then taking that next step and moving on to your MPPs and MPs and you taking action and never, ever quitting is so critical to your campaign and to our campaign. So I thank you all. I thank the, I'm so pleased that our police officers are here. I think it speaks volumes for who they are and what they want to see in the change. It's huge. Our Rebound folks, all of our community partners, this is who we are. We are a community. We work well together, and we have an opportunity to make a huge change. So please, when you hear Joe saying where you can make those donations, I'm going to say it one more time because I think it's critical. You can get out your cell phones right now if you'd like, but you can text the word BOOTS to 41010 and donate $10 to the Push for Change, and you can make a difference. You can also have, I was going to say you can only get a pin if you make a donation, but Joe told me I have to give them anyway. So the pins are back here, and they are going to be given out to you as well. And I would ask that Lori Green, the Rebound representatives, Lisa Myers, the PFC representatives, and of course Joe and his team, if you would come up to the front, we'd like to get a photo opportunity, and then we will have a media scrum after that. So in anticipation of the media scrum and the photography, I would like to thank all of you for sitting here and being enraptured. It's so great to see when students are just so engaged. I could hardly hear a pin drop. It's awesome. It's awesome. It means that you are going to make a difference. I thank you all. Bye-bye.